The moment the aircraft carrier's radar picks up an unfamiliar vessel trailing in the distance, alarms don't start blaring. But everyone on the bridge knows exactly what's happening. This isn't just a fishing boat or a commercial ship, it's something different. And in this case, it's a Chinese spy ship, lurking just close enough to observe, analyze, and gather intelligence. Right away, the carrier's intelligence officers start piecing together the situation. They use a mix of radar tracking, infrared scanning, and electronic warfare systems to get a full picture. Radar tells them the ship's speed, heading, and size. Infrared sensors help in spotting heat signatures, which could reveal the number of personnel on board and any active equipment. Electronic warfare specialists listen in on signals coming from the vessel, trying to determine what kind of data it's collecting and whether it's communicating with other units. Every bit of information helps in making the next decision. Standard protocol kicks in. The carrier's communications team attempts radio contact on internationally recognized maritime channels. A calm but firm voice comes over the radio.
Unidentified vessel, this is HMS Queen Elizabeth of the Royal Navy. You are operating in proximity to a UK naval task force. Identify yourself and state your intentions.
No threats, no aggression, just a professional message making it clear that the Royal Navy knows the ship is there and is watching. Most of the time, a commercial ship or even a foreign military vessel on a routine mission would acknowledge the call. But when a spy ship is involved, things are different. The Chinese vessel might remain silent, ignoring the hail, or it might respond with vague, unhelpful information, something like,
"We are conducting lawful operations in international waters."
Technically, that's not incorrect, but it's also not a real answer. It's a way of saying,
"We're here, and we're not going anywhere."
This is where things get tricky. The Royal Navy has a decision to make. Does the carrier group continue its mission as planned and ignore the spy ship? Do they take defensive measures, such as altering their course or limiting electronic emissions to reduce the intelligence value of the surveillance? Or do they escalate by deploying additional assets, like a destroyer or a surveillance aircraft, to shadow the spy ship in return? Every move is calculated. If the carrier alters its course too much, it might look like it's being forced to react. If it ignores the spy ship completely, valuable intelligence about its operations could be compromised, and if it escalates too aggressively, it could turn a silent standoff into a diplomatic incident. So, this phase of the encounter is all about control. The Royal Navy has to dictate the pace of the engagement, making sure that, no matter what happens, it remains in charge. But the thing is, the Chinese spy ship is also not going anywhere. Instead, it's holding position just far enough to avoid being seen as a direct threat, while staying close enough to gather every bit of intelligence it can. At this point, it's clear that the spy ship is here to observe, document, and analyze the Royal Navy's operations. The aircraft carrier's crew knows this is no ordinary encounter. The ship's sensors are constantly tracking the spy vessel, logging its every movement, every course adjustment, and every change in signal emissions. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy has a decision to make. Do they continue as if nothing is happening, trusting their counter-surveillance measures to minimize what the Chinese can learn? Or do they take a more active approach to disrupt the spy ship's mission? One option is to adjust the fleet's formation. An aircraft carrier is never out in the sea alone. It's always accompanied by a strike group, which typically includes destroyers, frigates, and support vessels. By repositioning these escorts, the Royal Navy can create a sort of buffer zone between the carrier and the spy ship. It's a subtle but effective move. A destroyer casually altering course to block the spy vessel's line of sight? That sends a message without saying a word. It's not an act of aggression, but it's a clear signal that the Royal Navy is aware and in control. Another possibility is to send a more direct response from the air. The carrier's air wing includes F-35B Lightning II fighter jets, highly advanced stealth aircraft that can be scrambled at a moment's notice. Launching a patrol flight, even if just for routine overwatch, can change the dynamic instantly. A single F-35 flying overhead forces the spy ship to rethink its position. It's a reminder that, while it may be tracking the carrier, the Royal Navy has the capability to watch right back, with an overwhelming advantage in speed, firepower, and visibility. Sometimes a lower-profile approach is more effective. A surveillance drone can be deployed to hover near the spy ship, capturing high-resolution images and monitoring its activity. Unlike a fighter jet, a drone doesn't make noise or need to refuel. It can stay in the air for hours, quietly recording everything. The presence of an unmanned aircraft makes it clear. Every move the spy ship makes is being logged and analyzed in return. The Royal Navy isn't looking for a fight, but it also won't be passive. This isn't a battle in the traditional sense. It's a chess game at sea. Every action from one side prompts a reaction from the other. The longer the spy ship lingers, the clearer it becomes that this isn't just surveillance. It's a test, and the Royal Navy is making sure it's one that China doesn't pass easily. Since at sea, power isn't just about who has the biggest guns, it's also about who has the best information. Modern naval warfare is as much a battle of data and electronic warfare as it is of ships and firepower. And when a Chinese spy ship is tailing a Royal Navy aircraft carrier, it's not looking to fight. It's looking to listen. Every radar ping, every radio transmission, every electronic signal coming from the carrier is valuable intelligence. That's why the Royal Navy has to play its own game, making sure that even as they're being watched, they're not giving anything away. One of the first countermeasures they might use is altering their radar emissions. Military ships don't just have one radar frequency. They have multiple settings and configurations, and they don't always broadcast on full power. By subtly adjusting these emissions, the Royal Navy can make it harder for the Chinese spy ship to get a complete picture of their capabilities. It's like speaking in code instead of giving away clear instructions. The spy ship is trying to record how the carrier's radar operates, but if the Royal Navy keeps changing the signals, the data becomes unreliable. Communications security is another key factor. The Chinese vessel isn't just listening to radar, it's also trying to intercept radio transmissions between ships in the carrier group. Every message sent over open frequencies could be picked up and analyzed. That's why encrypted communication is critical. Secure channels, frequency hopping, and coded transmissions ensure that even if the spy ship intercepts a signal, it won't be able to make sense of it. If the situation becomes more serious, the carrier group has another powerful tool: MCON, or emission control. This is when a warship deliberately minimizes or shuts down its electronic emissions to avoid detection or limit the intelligence an enemy can gather. In full MCON mode, the aircraft carrier operates almost silently in the electromagnetic spectrum. No unnecessary radar pings, no open radio transmissions, and only the most secure communications. It makes the ship harder to track and reduces the amount of data a surveillance vessel can collect. Meanwhile, while the spy ship is trying to gather intelligence, the Royal Navy is doing the same. The carrier's intelligence officers and electronic warfare specialists are monitoring the spy ship's signals, analyzing its radio traffic, and identifying its surveillance methods. If the spy ship has any unique capabilities or new equipment, the Royal Navy is taking notes. Surveillance works both ways. This is why modern naval encounters feel more like a game of chess than a traditional battle. The goal isn't just to outmaneuver the enemy physically, but to stay one step ahead in the information war. The Chinese ship might be watching, but the Royal Navy is making sure it sees only what they want it to see. And in this invisible war, the side that controls the flow of information holds the real power. Although the Royal Navy may have successfully countered the spy ship's surveillance efforts, the encounter isn't just about tactics and technology. Every move at sea has consequences beyond the water. Now, the question shifts to legality, diplomacy, and what this standoff means for international relations. On paper, the rules of the sea are pretty straightforward. A ship sailing in international waters has the right to be there, whether it belongs to the UK, China, or any other country. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, military vessels, including surveillance ships, can operate freely as long as they don't violate territorial waters or engage in hostile actions. So, technically, the Chinese spy ship shadowing the Royal Navy's aircraft carrier isn't breaking the law. But here's where things get complicated. There's a big difference between being legally present and being strategically aggressive. China's use of surveillance ships near foreign military vessels is nothing new. They've done it with the US Navy, they've done it with Australian warships, and now they're doing it with the Royal Navy. The goal is always the same: gather intelligence while staying just within legal limits. The challenge for the UK is figuring out where to draw the line between routine naval activity and a direct challenge to its operational security. This is where diplomatic tensions start to rise. If the Royal Navy treats the Chinese vessel as a non-threat and ignores it, does that set a precedent for future surveillance? Does it encourage more aggressive intelligence gathering from adversaries? On the other hand, if the UK pushes back too forcefully, say by deploying warships to shadow the spy vessel or increasing defensive measures, it risks escalating the situation into something bigger. That's a fine line to walk, especially when dealing with a global power like China. The UK's response here also matters beyond just this one incident. It sends a message to NATO allies and other Western naval forces about how Britain plans to handle similar encounters in the future. If the UK takes a strong stance, it reinforces a tougher policy toward Chinese naval surveillance. If it plays it cool, other nations might take that as a sign that they too should focus on de-escalation rather than confrontation. And then there's the larger geopolitical picture. The UK and China already have a complicated relationship. While they engage in trade and diplomacy, tensions over military issues, especially in maritime regions, are increasing. A surveillance encounter like this might seem minor, but it fits into a broader pattern of China asserting itself on the global stage. The Royal Navy isn't just dealing with one spy ship. It's dealing with a shift in how China operates at sea, one that will likely continue for years to come. So, these types of naval encounters aren't going away anytime soon. And every time they happen, they shape the rules of engagement just a little bit more. In the Indo-Pacific, China is already actively expanding its influence, but also in waters closer to Europe and other strategic locations. This is part of a bigger picture. China's increasing naval presence isn't random, and these surveillance missions are far from isolated incidents. For years, Western military ships, especially those from the US, UK, Australia, and Japan, have found themselves being trailed by Chinese intelligence-gathering vessels. In the South China Sea, where China has built artificial islands and military outposts, these kinds of encounters happen regularly. Anytime a US or Allied warship sails through to challenge Beijing's territorial claims, a Chinese vessel, whether a warship, Coast Guard ship, or spy ship, is almost always nearby, monitoring every move. But it's not just the Indo-Pacific. Chinese naval surveillance operations have reached areas where their presence wasn't common before. In recent years, Chinese vessels have been spotted near European waters, monitoring NATO exercises. They've also been seen off the coast of Alaska, watching U.S. military drills. Even in the Indian Ocean, where China is securing influence through its string of pearls strategy, building relationships and military footholds in key maritime locations, Chinese intelligence ships have been active. The Royal Navy is no stranger to this. During joint operations with the U.S. Navy, British warships have been followed by Chinese vessels, especially when operating in the Pacific. The UK's deployment of HMS Queen Elizabeth to the Indo-Pacific in 2021 saw multiple encounters with Chinese naval forces, particularly when sailing through contested waters. Even when the Royal Navy operates independently, such as during patrols in the North Atlantic or near the Arctic, Chinese surveillance ships have been detected, showing that Beijing's interest in naval intelligence is global. The question is, why is China doing this? The answer is a mix of strategy and preparation. China wants to know exactly how Western navies operate, how their warships communicate, how they position themselves, what their electronic systems look like in real time. Surveillance ships aren't gathering information for the sake of curiosity. They're collecting intelligence that could be used in a future conflict. If tensions between China and the West escalate, the data gathered from these encounters could give Beijing an advantage. For the UK and its allies, recognizing these patterns is critical. Every time a Chinese spy ship appears, it's another opportunity to study its tactics and refine countermeasures. The more these encounters are tracked and analyzed, the better prepared the Royal Navy and other allied forces will be for future encounters. Every time a Chinese spy ship shadows a Royal Navy aircraft carrier, it's not just an isolated event, it's a warning for the future. Surveillance ships are becoming a bigger part of modern naval strategy, and these encounters are shaping how the Royal Navy and its allies operate at sea. If China is gathering intelligence on carrier operations, the UK and NATO need to stay ahead by adapting their own tactics and counter-surveillance methods. One of the first changes we're likely to see is enhanced counter-surveillance protocols. The Royal Navy already uses electronic warfare tools to limit the intelligence a spy ship can gather. But these systems will need to evolve as surveillance technology gets more advanced. That means new ways to disguise electronic signals, smarter encryption for communications, and more aggressive emission control strategies to reduce a carrier's electronic footprint. If a spy ship can't gather useful intelligence, it makes the mission less effective. Another area of focus will be better escort coordination. Right now, a carrier strike group includes destroyers and frigates that provide security, but future operations might see escorts playing a bigger role in actively deterring spy ships. Instead of just monitoring an intelligence-gathering vessel, a Royal Navy destroyer could position itself in a way that blocks the spy ship's sensors from collecting useful data. Even simple maneuvers, like adjusting formation or using helicopters and drones to keep a constant eye on surveillance vessels, could make a big difference in keeping operations secure. Then there's cyber warfare. Modern naval battles aren't just fought with weapons, they're fought with data. China isn't just using spy ships to watch aircraft carriers, they're also looking for cyber vulnerabilities in military networks. A surveillance vessel could be trying to intercept encrypted communications, map out data flows, or even probe for weaknesses that could be exploited in a future conflict. Because of this, the Royal Navy and NATO forces will have to invest heavily in cybersecurity, making sure their networks are locked down tight and their digital communications are resistant to hacking attempts. But these encounters don't just affect the Royal Navy, they have wider strategic consequences for NATO as a whole. China's growing naval intelligence efforts aren't limited to one region. They're showing up in the Indo-Pacific, the Arctic, even near Europe. As these encounters become more common, Allied navies will need to work together more closely, sharing intelligence and coordinating responses. If the UK, US, Japan, and Australia are all facing the same challenge, the solution has to be collective. Not just individual nations adjusting their strategies, but full-scale coordination between allied forces. The biggest challenge in all of this is avoiding escalation. No one wants a minor surveillance encounter to turn into an international crisis, but if tensions keep rising, the risk of miscalculation increases. The Royal Navy has to strike a balance, protecting its assets while preventing any unnecessary confrontations. That means carefully planned responses, clear rules of engagement, and constant adaptation to new threats. Although the Royal Navy handled the situation professionally, as the aircraft carrier wasn't forced to change course, the Chinese spy ship didn't provoke an incident, and everything stayed within the limits of international law. But was this really the best response? Or does this kind of passive approach encourage even more aggressive surveillance in the future? That's what military analysts are debating. Some say this was a textbook example of strategic patience, proving that the UK won't be rattled by intelligence-gathering missions. Others argue that this shows a need for stronger deterrence, because if surveillance ships keep trailing Western naval forces without consequences, what's stopping them from pushing even further? The Royal Navy's options are limited. It can't open fire on a vessel that hasn't done anything illegal. It can't force the spy ship out of the area. The best it can do is respond with electronic countermeasures, tactical positioning, and a show of strength. But that leads to a bigger question. Is that enough? Analysts worry that China is using these encounters not just to gather intelligence, but to test responses, figuring out exactly how far they can go before they're met with a stronger reaction. If that's the case, every time a Western Navy allows a spy ship to operate nearby without real consequences, it's feeding into a pattern of increasing boldness from Beijing. Diplomatic experts see this from a different angle. They argue that as long as these encounters remain routine and controlled, they're manageable. There's no direct confrontation, no hostile escalation, and no international crisis. Just two naval forces testing each other in a game of observation and deterrence. But at what point does this stop being a routine event and turn into something more serious? China's naval expansion isn't slowing down. If anything, these surveillance operations are happening more frequently and in more locations, not just in the South China Sea, but in the Arctic, the Indian Ocean, and even near Europe. That suggests a bigger strategy, not just isolated incidents. Then there's the intelligence side of things. Surveillance ships aren't just floating observation posts. They're part of a larger network of intelligence gathering that includes satellites, cyber operations, and human espionage. The real challenge for the Royal Navy isn't just dealing with one ship. It's figuring out how all these pieces fit together. Intelligence specialists are debating how to counter foreign surveillance without exposing too much. If the Royal Navy shows all its counter-surveillance techniques every time a spy ship appears, China learns how to adapt. But if the UK holds back, it risks being too passive. It's a fine line between secrecy and strategic deterrence. The big question now is, where does this go from here? Do these encounters continue as controlled, predictable standoffs? Or are they leading toward a more contested, more dangerous era at sea? Military tensions between the West and China are already rising. If surveillance missions keep escalating, the potential for miscalculations and accidental confrontations grows. No one wants that, but no one's backing down either. And that's why every encounter like this matters. It's not just about one spy ship following one aircraft carrier. It's about the future of naval warfare and where this strategic chess game will lead next. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments down below.